Welcome once again to The Lost Signals discusses games and gaming culture, a pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast where we focus on various aspects of video games as well as other issues and topics within gaming in general. Hello there, welcome back to Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture, formerly known as Syntax Error. And so just a quick PSA for this year/season, we're doing sort of a revamp, sort of a remodeling, if you will, of some of our stuff. So you'll see some new logos and so forth, and we're going to have a new website, etc. So just to let you know, since this is our flagship show, in a sense, or at least the one we started out with, and of course, so now that Games and Gaming Culture is back, we're doing top games of 2017. I, of course, remain unchanged. Scott Thurlow, here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I'm in constant flux.
And Stephen Amosi.
And I can't decide where I am at the moment.
He fears change. So, we'll just jump into it. I admit that I probably played more games than you guys, just on average this year. That's going to be true broadly. So we're going to start off with our top games, and we're going to count backwards from 5 to 1, and I will lead off. So, caveat here, I have a number of ties on my list this year, on all lists, even honorable mentions, and even like shitty games I have ties for. So yes, I'm cheating a bit, so it's going to be actually more than 5 for each list, technically. But to defend myself a little bit, I feel as if the ones I've lumped together, in a sense, that they both exemplify something within the genre that they're each broadly within and did something for games. So without further ado, my number 5 is a tie with Observer and Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. So both of these were sort of indie games. Quick lineage. Observer was the devs who did Layers of Fear, which I really liked. I mentioned that previously. And Hellblade was sort of like a weird... the way it shook down was that people described it as a AAA indie game, in a sense. It was like its own separate studio, developed by them and published digitally by them. But the thing I liked about both is that they both were sort of vague walking simulators. Observer's an FPS. Hellblade was sort of Dark Soulsy in a sense. There's some rudimentary combat. But what they really addressed was some really dark psychological stuff. Like, each character is filtered through a viewpoint that delves into some pretty disturbing territory, and I thought well handled in a mature way. Hellblade does it through sort of a past lens, if you will, with Celtic and Nordic culture, and basically like dealing with having a mental illness, pretty much. Whereas Observer is sort of a cyberpunk dystopian future, and how technology might like screw with your mind, and if we interface with technology, brain implants and so forth. Yeah, it's sort of some standard stuff that you've seen. But they both did a really good job of just portraying it. They're both really well done tales, and I was quite impressed by both. So that's why they sit, again, like I said, equal at number 5. So, now you guys.
So I have Horizon Zero Dawn as my 5th choice.
Okay. Good pick.
I completed the entire game. I really enjoyed it. It was a unique environment that they developed with primal technology, in a way of like using kind of like the saber-tooth tiger, that kind of if you played Far Cry Primal, it's all those kind of creatures except mechanized.
Except they're robots. Yeah,
it was a really neat way they dealt with it. It just, there was something that like it's a hard thing to describe with it, because it was all done well, but none of it was truly outstanding.
Particularly new, I want to say.
Yeah, and even the narrative of it, it had a strong female character, and that was great, but almost all of like the secondary characters were kind of maybe one-dimensional.
You've seen them before in other third-person open-world action games, for sure.
So that's why it's down on my list, but it was a very enjoyable game to play through.
That's fair. I've got more to say because that game is, spoiler, higher up on my list, but I'll get to it when I get to it. Steve-O, what do you got?
Well, as my own caveat, I didn't even play really 5 full games this year. I was kind of a slacker in the games department. But due to a nexus in space-time, I think Scott has like 9 games in his fucking top 5.
Like I said.
So
I somehow, dude, before you go on, I was surprised when I was making my list. Like, shit, I played more games than I thought, even though we were so busy. But to be fair, so you played what you played.
So I am going to, you know what, I'm not even going to put anything as my 5th game, but I am going to talk about a game that you just mentioned, Scott, that I actually really looked interesting and I really want to check out.
Okay.
So Observer looked really cool, and I watched you play a little bit of it.
That's what you did.
That's one that I really want to check out just because of the themes that you were describing and kind of how it looked at its world. So I do want to check that out.
I do recommend it.
And I will have a number 4 game. So
all right.
Go on.
Well, fair enough. So Steve-O has a blank, but acceptably so. So I'm going to move into my number 4. Again, another tie. It's Resident Evil 7 and Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. And because the reason I did that is because they're FPS games. So I'll start with Wolfenstein. It was a really good continuation of what they set up with the previous Wolfenstein from 2015. I can't remember the subtitle, but like basically the new gen console Wolfenstein iteration. They took the core loop of Wolfenstein is what? Kill all the Nazis, get all the guns, and do it in every level, like pretty much, right? Mm-hmm. Except they gave Blasco and his little cadre of like rebellious friends, because essentially the Nazis won the war. They took over America. It's like 1960 and change now. So you got like a radical black activist, you got like a conspiracy alien nut, but they're all part of a little crew, and they're all really well done characters. And as applied to like the themes, as exemplified by Blasco and so forth, it was deeper than it almost like deserves credit for, in a sense, like deeper than you think it was. And on top of that, the core gameplay was fucking awesome. Like I said, there's really good level design, quite good enemies. They gave you some chance to do some stealth, although not like overly so. But if you wanted to, like you could play it stealthily if you want, but inevitably it devolves into like all the Nazis run into the room and you just blow them all away, and that's still super fun. Mm-hmm. But again, what really got me was the way they didn't skimp on developing characters and like made it believable. And I bought into the story of these like little circle of rebels trying to overthrow like the oppressive, tyrannical Nazi regime that has taken over the world essentially. So yeah, it was a really good continuation and well done on their part. Resident Evil 7, somewhat conversely, it was the kick in the ass that Resident Evil franchise desperately needed. And the switch to FPS was one of the big reasons, I think, why. And tied to that was they just stopped. They did away with all the bullshit, the convoluted, like, Umbrella's doing this and that, and Wesker's blah, 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 blah. Nah. You're just a dude in, like, a creepy mansion in Louisiana trying to find your wife. And yes, it has some tangential tie-ins to, like, the lore of Resident Evil at large. But really, it's just like you in a claustrophobic, scary-ass, spooky place trying to figure out and trying to, like, you know, yeah, it has, like, the classic, like, find 3 weird little objects that open up a door and blah, blah, blah. Like, those, like, bizarrely themed puzzles that they always have. But that's Res Evil, and I think they were well integrated. And it was just, like, a nice, refreshing, like, not reboot. I don't want to say that. Just they found a way to capture the spirit and essence of what Res Evil was and, like, why it was so important and impactful originally to games. And this one, like, I was really impressed with it. Capcom did a great job. And the DLCs are also a nice little, like, kind of fun little addition to them. They were, like, up and down in quality, but overall, they were pretty solid, and I appreciated what they did with it. But just the core game itself was just very impressive. It got me right away, and I was like, yes, this is the Resident Evil that the fans deserve and been asking for a while, so good on them for doing it that way.
Perhaps the better statement should have been, these are 2 games that injected new life into franchises that probably should have died a long time ago.
Or could have died. No, you're right. That's a really well phrase of saying it. But because of
number
that.
4 is also Resident Evil 7.
Yep.
I think it's the best entry in the franchise, actually.
It's up there. Check out my article about it. But yeah.
Gothic horror is always... And kind of Louisiana...
kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre-y, sort of, but not like a direct ripoff.
I forget that. The Deliverance.
Yeah.
It's a Deliverance-y type style.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And I think that the first-person viewpoint and kind of the return to the let's be scary versus a shooter, it was very kind of important for this game. To be honest, yeah. I haven't finished the game.
But you played like 60% or so.
Enough to discuss about it, and I think was a great entry, and if not the best of the franchise.
Yep. All right, Steve-O.
So my number 4 is a game that I don't think anybody else played, I got this maybe a month or two ago just because it was a game that came out in 2017 and I was looking at like what I was going to talk about in this episode, and it turned out to be pretty fun. It had its issues, but it's a game called Sexy Brutale.
Yep.
And it's a game that really messes with time, kind of you...
As a mechanic, right?
Yeah.
I believe.
So you go through your day, and every day at a specific time, the day starts over.
So it's fucking Majora's Mask.
Basically, you have to go back... Yeah, well, kind of. But you have to go back and, figure out what you did wrong, and if you get caught, like, a way not to get caught. It's kind of like a murder mystery house, but every day of the day starts over until you figure out like the key to progressing the plot, and then you do something else, and you work on another puzzle of the game, and it was fun. Some of the mechanics were a little bit iffy, but I like the idea of the game, and the level design and the character design was pretty cool.
What genre is it? Like a side scroller, like sort of like a venture game?
No, it's like
I only know a little bit about it. I know of it and sort of vaguely its general
like
premise.
Top down,
like Hotline Miami-ish, but with new graphics.
Yeah, with like better graphics and like much slower gameplay than Hotline Miami.
Right, but I'm just saying the perspective, like design wise.
Exactly. So you can like kind of peek through doors and stuff like that, and it was cool. There's a lot of interesting stuff about the game.
All right, cool, very nice, good pick. All right, so I'm moving on to my number 3, which Ian had just before. It's Horizon Zero Dawn. Now I'm trying to not say a lot about this game because, as he just mentioned, it's odd that in a sense it's nothing. This game has nothing you haven't seen before. It's almost like Far Cry in its crafting system and sort of its questing system, although it's in third-person open world. But yeah, I like the protagonist. She was a well-done character and very well voice-acted. And the side characters were fine to me. Although I see your point, like some of them were a little bit flat, like they're the ones you've seen in every single game like this in which you get side quests from them. But it felt fresh for somehow. Like everything just clicked. The world design was really great. I thought the overall quests were perfectly fine. Good to great as well. And yeah, just like the combat mechanics, shooting off a certain element of a machine to make it do something, or shooting an ice arrow at a machine's like ice pack that freezes it and to do extra damage and shit like that. Like it was just so much fun just to go through and to mess around like and level up and so forth and get the skills you need, which again is nothing you've ever seen before. It, like I said, it reminded me a lot of the Far Cry progression system and the crafting as well, but it made it feel, those mechanics feel fresh because its level design and sort of premise were just something you haven't quite seen before, and especially for being a new IP. And this game won gathered a lot of accolades. It won a couple of awards here and there at various ceremonies, and so, like GDC gave it 1 or 2 things. But yeah, it impressed the hell out of me for what it was, and just sort of like came out of nowhere in a sense that I was like, yeah, this is using a simple, if not a familiar formula, and just giving it a completely fresh feeling sensation throughout, and it was really enjoyable to go through. So it really impressed me, and I think that's why I put it at number 3. Deserves it. Alrighty.
I guess it's such a good game that the lack of narrative structure in it, which it was okay. It was an okay story. It did so much else very well that it became glaringly like, it feels like a glaring omission, and perhaps the sequel will have a lot more of the heft I want in it. But
fair enough. The DLC was, I would say, like was solid too. Although you don't need to play it, the core game is fine. But I think we mentioned this before. My last thought on it is like, it's a reverse of like the parts are like greater than the sum in a sense, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the reverse of the normal phrase.
For my number 3, I'm going to cheat a bit in a different way than
Cheating's
Scott,
all good.
Which I am nominating a remaster of a game that I loved back in the day, which is L.A. Noire, the remastered edition.
Perfectly valid.
I like this even more because I played the original when it came out, and I got the DLCs later. Having all of them kind of sequentially gives the narrative structure a little bit more heft,
more coherence.
I'm still playing it as it is now, but like I feel like I've spent more time in the different individual departments with the DLC attachments
because it breaks it up a little bit better. You're saying, yeah.
And the one issue is collectibles. The only thing they added in the remastered
is more
collectibles.
Hey, there's more,
which does nothing to further anything. And there are points to collectibles that.
Yes. All right. That is a valid concern, and we're going to cover the C word, if you will, later on the season. Collectibles, that is. So, yes, I see what you mean, but we're going to have a whole separate discussion, a whole episode, in fact, about that. But I see what you mean, and you were describing to me off-cast, like, what they did with the collectibles in this game. So
it added nothing.
Yeah. So fair enough. Yeah. All right, Steve-O?
So my number 3, I'm sorry, was Seasons After Fall, which was a game that Ian and I both played.
Yep.
Just a fun puzzle game with really brilliant art. And you play like a ghost fox.
Supernatural magic fox.
Yeah, just kind of roaming through nature and solving puzzles and trying to solve the problems of the forest. And that's it. It's a very calming, like soothing game. And the puzzles, while not super difficult, are somewhat difficult. And,
they're challenging, right? You guys were saying to me.
Yeah. Especially some of the later on ones.
Like, it makes you think is all.
But yeah, but they're fun to solve. When you get them, it's not like you haven't gotten to that point of frustration where you're like, screw this, let me just get past it.
Yeah.
But you also haven't. It also wasn't so easy that you get nothing out of it, which was nice.
Sure. So it struck a nice balance between like that design.
Yeah. And I thought it was a pretty great game. And that was my number 3.
All right. So now we come to my number 2. And again, it's a tie. And a caveat built upon the tying caveat is that actually these 2 games are the most important games of the year to me in terms of advancing the medium. My number 1 is sort of more of a personal pick, but at number 2, I have What Remains of Edith Finch and Night in the Woods. And here's why. Their narratives are on the cutting edge of video games, I feel, at this point. They're taking the framework, so Edith Finch, again, is a first-person walking sim, but it's the best one to date, by far. If not even by far, just is, because it built upon things like Ethan Carter, Gone Home, Dear Esther, took that structure and just cleverly played with it and created like a great weaving of tales together. I don't wish to speak at length upon it because really you have to play this game. That's all I can say about it because of the way it did its narrative and within that like simple mechanics, like again, walking sim mechanics, but each little tale of that Edith Finch encounters, if you will, I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible, has its own feel and sort of style to it, but they all weave together in sort of a quilt of awesomeness. It's the best way I can describe it, and it did win narrative just recently at GDC at the Indie Game Awards or something like that. So yeah, just trust me, if you're into it, if you're into games, and especially narrative within games and what can be done within that, you have to play Edith Finch because it pushes it forward, it elevates the genre and games as a whole. Night in the Woods, sort of the same thing. It's not a walking sim per se. It's more of like it's a platformer on the surface, but really it's you like going around town. You're an anthropomorphic 20-year-old cat who drops out of college, female that is. Like your name is May, short for Margaret, and you come back home and like sort of try to reconnect, sort of just figuring yourself out. It addresses a lot of like hardcore real life issues. Like you're in a small/middle Midwestern town, middle-sized Midwestern town. It's falling apart. People are out of jobs. People are lamenting the fact that big factories, big like Walmart style things are coming in, and like the mining industry is drying up. Like so, you just go around talking to your old friends and citizens and trying to reconnect and figuring yourself out with like sort of a mystery, sort of a supernatural-ish element story thrown in. But like just again, the writing is top notch. It takes maybe a little bit to get into it. I will say it feels a little bit slow. It's a bit of a slow burn to start. But nevertheless, the issues and the sort of like things it addresses both personally and as a societal concerns at large were just really, really well handled. And again, you don't see that stuff a lot. And I think it's important to be recognized because this game just unflinchingly tackles a lot of like real life issues. Yeah, viewed through the light of like talking to an anthropomorphic fox or an alligator or whatever. But nevertheless, these characters feel real. And you have like sort of like vague, quick like decisions to make like what you're going to say. But just the dialogue was so spot on. even though sometimes it veered to like too witty, almost like Sorkin-esque levels, you might say, Steve-O.
Right.
But that's only few and far between. For the most part, it addresses some very real and very serious issues, and the art style is really incredible as well. You got to check it out. And the music, the soundtrack is, can't stop listening to it. It matches perfectly. But again, juxtaposed in a sense with the issues it tackles and what it has to say about them. So yeah, these two games are on the forefront of what games can be and how these studios are making them and pushing it forward. So that's my rant on those two games.
I played about 5 minutes of
Night in the Woods.
Until I got to a maybe 20-minute long Guitar Hero segment.
There are segments there's mini games, yes.
So
that's true.
I plan to get to it eventually, but I don't include it on any of my lists.
Fair enough.
Because I haven't played enough.
But I'm saying before you go on, trust me, it's worth it. Even though, yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a slow start. It sort of slow rolls you in a sense. But
I mean, that's a slow roll indeed of Guitar Hero.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 is Torment Tides of Numenera. I shouldn't include this because it appeals to nostalgia, and I hate nostalgia. It's and this is definitely made for me because my favorite game of all time is Baldur's Gate 2, and this is
it's basically the people who made that
successor. I knew it was developed by them, but it's hitting on all the notes and improving upon all the notes of what I loved of that game. So, yeah, I'm going to give it nostalgic 2, but an angry 2 for preying upon my weakness.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Steve-O.
My number 2 is a game that, again, neither one of you guys have played. It is a browser-based web game.
And that's why we didn't play it.
Universal Paperclips, and it is goddamn brilliant. I can't talk too much about it without giving a lot of it away, but it starts as this like very mundane, boring, clicking a button over and over and over again, and quickly becomes this incredibly complex, and then like more and more complex.
Could you call them puzzles?
I don't want to say
sense.
No,
very broadly.
They're not.
Okay,
it's not puzzles. It's just it's a game where you're trying to collect resources, I guess, right?
Okay.
But you just do that by clicking buttons. But then they get increasingly more complex. You get more buttons to push, and like things start affecting other things. And then out of nowhere, you realize that there has been a story building this entire time, and then it gets crazy. I don't want to say any more than that, but like
keep it vague, but okay, that sounds intriguing for sure.
It's awesome. It's such a good payoff at the end of it, and
very nice.
I highly recommend anybody who has 3 or 4 hours to spare, just play it. You can get through it in 3 or 4 hours, and I actually played it twice.
Did you play multiple playthroughs?
I think I played it twice in a day because I just had to. There's multiple endings, so I had to get another ending at the end of it. So
obviously.
Anyway, that's my number 2.
All right. So again, funnily enough, as Ian just sort of alluded to, my number 1 is Torment Tides of Numenera. And here's why. Yes, nostalgia. But I'm going to, again, it starts with that, for sure. It's a classic, a CRPG made by inXile. It was Kickstarted. It was one of like the most either fastest or biggest fun. It got like $4 million or whatever it was. So that's how they developed it. But it uses Numenera, which is a tabletop RPG by Monty Cook. It's a Monty Cook game. And the framework of it is basically Clark's Third Law laid large. It's Earth a billion years in the future with like all this bizarre ass shit into it, like all these like crazy weird wreckage that's from the past that nobody understands how it works. And like the plot, it's a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, if anyone knows about that as well. But yeah, it got to me because it was a game made by people that I trust to make games, to make a game that I'm gonna love, and they did it. It just got like, and the writing is excellent. Like I think Monty Cook was consultant on the writing as well. It's all just like a lot of description, and yeah, it's a lot of dialogue choices, and like I hesitate to call them morality choices. The titular tides, if you will, sort of influence how your character is and what decisions you can make. But yeah, the world design was incredible. I loved just like exploring and seeing weird ass shit And all of it's like a mystery. Even your characters don't know what the fuck is going on, really. Like, people like just live in this world. Like, yeah, this machine does whatever. It's been here like for generations. We don't know exactly how it works because someone else built it. But it just got me into this world. And I actually bought quick story. We started playing the tabletop Numenera game. In fact, like I sort of forced a bunch of us to do it because it's a setting for me. If I was 12 to 14, and this game had come out and the setting existed, it would by far be my favorite sci-fi / fantasy setting ever. So like it got me on that front, but just the writing itself was very mature and also like just perfectly spot on for what the world was set up to be. So yes, it's sort of like a personal pick. As I said, Edith and Night in the Woods are the most important games. They should technically be at number 1, but my my emotional pick is Torment, and that's why. And it was just excellent. I couldn't get enough of it. I played. It probably took me like 40 hours to play. And I loved every second of it. So that's why it's number 1 for me.
Nice.
Yeah, as you just said, What Remains of Edith Finch should be number 1. I'm going to say one sentence about it. That it's the closest that a game has ever approached art. Like actual important art that I've ever played.
Yep. Well said. I agree. Steve-O?
I don't know if I would go that far. However, it was also my favorite
but
game of the year.
It's number 1, right, for you?
And I think it does. I think it is a piece of art. I wouldn't brook an argument with anybody about that. I like. It was it was an incredibly moving piece.
Yeah.
That played with the conventions of video games
exactly
so well. And yeah, it is a walking sim, so there's not all the extra things that come with a lot of other games. It's just
simplified mechanics, really.
There's no combat or anything like that. But the story that the game tells is amazing. The art direction is amazing.
Yep.
And how it enfolds a lot of other elements into it, like story elements into the game, is incredibly well done. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. Go play it.
As I said, it's approaching like close to, I think.
It should be in a fucking museum.
Or an art
for
gallery.
a video game.
Yeah,
I think it's it's the frontier of this medium.
I think it should be in the MoMA.
Yeah, like I said, it's advancing the medium and in the best way. So we all gave it credit, but like I said, it should be my number 1. But I said what I said about why it's not technically. So I'll move on to our honor rolls, which we'll just count down in normal order, if you will. So number 1, I've got again another tie but this one I think I can get away with more because it's Prey and Dishonored: Death of the Outsider, which are both made by Arcane Studios that came out this year. If I had to pick one, I'd say Prey's a little bit stronger. Death of the Outsider was a nice little send-off, cap-off to the Dishonored arc, if you will. I don't think they have plans to make any more, at least soon. But it was everything that if you're a fan of Dishonored, that you know and love and remember, and wrapped up the story, like wrapped up some plot points that were left like somewhat dangling, or at least not quite as addressed in 1 and 2. So I appreciate it for that. Prey was basically, again, they make immersive sims. That's what Arcane does, pretty much. Like, that's their main shtick. And they make really, really good ones. Prey was perfectly solid. It was, again, sort of, I called it Deus Honored: Isolation Shock. Took all elements from all those games. I wrote an article about it too, so again, you can check that out if you so wish. But because of that, it was a Frankenstein's monster, sort of like everything that come before it. And made it feel fresh. The gameplay was fucking solid. Combat was great. Upgrade system, upgrade trees. The sort of crafting system was not something you'd seen before, or not. They used it really well in a different way than even Horizon did. But yeah, it was just a perfectly solid, like sci-fi-ish shooter with a really. The story was fine, but it took a couple turns that I couldn't predict. I was like, all right. That's solid. You sort of like sidestepped me on that one in a good way. So I got to give him credit on that. So that's what to tie. Arcane, solid. Keep it up. Both your games you put out this year are on my honor roll.
Are we doing all? Or are we just doing one?
Go around. Yep.
Okay. So I'm doing my first honorable mention is Life is Strange Before the Storm. between Life is Strange, Before the Storm, and Lady Bird, I'm getting my 10,000 hours to being a teenage girl. I'd like.
Is that why you're wearing your hoodie like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go on.
I like Before the Storm better than Life is Strange, specifically since they got rid of the time travel or time
butterfly mechanic shit.
Effective mechanic. But so the mechanic of this one is you being sarcastic to people, which is something I can certainly. I wish there was actually a real life mechanic for that, but yeah, I thought it was a fun. Like if you liked the first one, it fleshes out the story more. It's a prequel, so you know what's happening. But I don't know. I thought it was like really well done and makes Chloe a very, very sympathetic character. Also, I watched one review where someone was complaining that like a lot of they were playing it good. You can't play this character good. You have to play this character as like
she set up to be
angry teenage girl, and then everything makes sense in the game.
Fair enough. So good RP on that.
Yeah.
You got Stevo.
I guess what I'm going to mention for this is the only other game from 2017 that I played.
Yeah.
And the only reason it didn't go into my top 5
That's cool.
probably is like 3 or 4 is because it's a DLC. It's the DLC to Dark Souls 3, The Ringed City. And
perfectly solid.
It's keeps doing all the great things that Dark Souls 3 did. You know, it's Dark Souls 3 was probably the easiest of the Soulsborne games, but still, it went back to what made the first game.
Or Blood Souls. I think there's a big divide in the community what to call them, but it doesn't matter. Just want to make that
Fair
joke.
enough.
Go on.
But it did, it did what Dark Souls 3 did really well, which was continue the feel of Dark Souls 1. Because I think Dark Souls 2 kind of fell away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
And
seems to be also a general consensus.
Yeah. So it continued, it brought back the feel of the first game and was a nice cap off to the Dark Souls series.
Right.
And the last DLC was the Ring City, and that was a good finishing salvo.
Yeah.
There'll always be Demon Souls
salvo.
for me.
Demons
can you
Souls.
By the way, can you have a closing salvo, or is it only an opening salvo?
I think the closing salvo is whoever wins the battle. Like, no, I like that phrase. And I see what you mean. Like, yeah. It's like from software to be like, hey, it's like Billy Mays, like Dark Souls. Hey, there's more.
Yeah.
So yeah, so solid. So all right, so I'm gonna go to my number 2 honor roll. It's Little Nightmares. Again, a really great puzzle game. Sort of platformer. I call it this year's Inside. So if you know Inside, it's basically that's what I'm saying about it. And it has a really great, again, sort of surreal art style to it. So you sort of have to see it. It's hard to describe, but it was really well done. It's basically, again, a puzzle platformer. You're a little child going through like a big scary place. And it was really clever. And like, again, I really, really enjoyed how they did the level design first and how it all tied into, like, it added up to a greater narrative. It's all environmental storytelling. There's no dialogue. There's no like pop-ups or anything like that. You just go through the puzzles, do the puzzles, and that's supposed to inform you like of what's happening, and it does a good job of that. So yeah, check it out. I really enjoyed it. It's a short game too, but yeah, the art style is something I haven't really seen before. It's sort of a claymation-y. That's the best way I can describe it to you in words. But it's really
almost like Gothic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a quality game, and that's why it's in my number 2 honor roll. So
I'm doing Seasons After Fall, which Steve already talked about. I think this is a very beautiful storybook in a way. Like
I can see that.
Very nice, pleasant story with not simple but not too difficult, like puzzles. I used to play video games with my dad when I was very young, and like I think this is something I could see like you playing with a child, because it's not offensive as a story, and the artwork is beautiful, and it's kind of a good brain teasers there. So
yeah.
I agree.
What do you got, Stevo? Anything else on honor roll? Back to me?
I'm out.
All right. Well, I'll fill the space. So number 3 for me is, and my fellows here can attest to this, it's Gwent. And it was fucking internet crack for me.
I did play Gwent.
Yeah,
that's
right. I played a lot of it. Like back in the summer of last year, it came out, like the beta came out, and personally, I love Magic the Gathering. And basically, it was, they took the core framework it was based on the fucking mini game from Witcher 3, an optional little thing you could do. But the fans loved it, like the hardcore Witcher fans, me being somewhat one of them. And we're like, hey, CD Projekt Red, you should make a whole game of this. They're like, all right then, we will. And because they're such a great studio that they didn't, it's not a cash in, it's not like a bullshit like jerk off, like, hey, we'll just make it. Yeah, it's still technically an open beta.
Yeah, I know.
Right, so
it's still free. Yeah,
yeah. So like you can still get it like right now and check it out. And they've had like a lot of upgrades and sort of tweaks and so forth. But yeah, it takes the core cycle of the Gwent rules from Witcher 3, fleshes them out. The artwork is awesome. You can even upgrade your cards to be animated, so it's like a status symbol, like, oh, my Geralt is like slashing the head off of whatever. Like you can see it when you play the card. But yeah, it's just great matchmaking. You can play casually, you can play ranked, and there's just so much to be found there. And I appreciate the fact that they created a product that is fully fleshed out, is such a service to the fans who wanted it, and it's not a cash grab. And it was just so much fun because if you like CCGs online, it was like one of the best ones I played ever. And yes, it happens to be based on a franchise I already like, but like I said, it was so well designed. They always do such a good job, so I gotta give them huge credit. I couldn't get enough of it for like 2 months. Like I just couldn't stop playing. I would come home on the weekend, stay up to like 4 a.m, just playing Gwent, and it was fucking awesome.
Yeah. Oh, let me jump in real quick because I also played Gwent, and I know you did too, Ian. But I don't know if you're going to talk about it.
You guys played briefly. We dueled a little bit.
Yeah, I played much less than Scott, but it was really interesting to like see this game that started off as a mini game come to fruition as like a fully fleshed out game. And I know they changed a lot of the rules and stuff to balance it and unbreak it basically from what it was in the game.
I will say just quickly, that's kind of the one downside. Like eventually I try to come back to it and they introduce new cards. Like this isn't a bad thing per se. It's just the nature of CCGs.
You have to keep playing it.
You have to keep up with the rules and like, oh, we changed this power and like this creature does something else.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. But yeah.
But from when I played, it was fairly well balanced and it was like a really interesting game. It was it was a test of trying to figure out if you could do enough math to beat your opponent or like try and figure out what they had.
The effects and so forth.
Similar to playing Magic
like
or any CCG, as you said. And like, it was a lot of fun. So I'll throw that on my honorable mentions as well.
All right, there you go. Nice. Yeah, basically I have here, I just want to say it is the complete opposite of a cash grab.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to give him credit on that.
At least so far.
Yeah. So, all right, so I'll come to my number 4 on a roll. Again, another quick tie. Evil with...
Hold on, I'm sorry. Ian, did you have another one?
I did.
I skipped right over.
Well, because he sort of slotted it in, so I'll go to you.
The Flame in the Flood. It's a girl and her dog meets hard mode Oregon Trail. When I eventually platinum Binding of Isaac, I will move over to Flame in the Flood.
Next hardcore game.
Smash my head against the wall as I have to figure out all the mechanics to survive to the end. And it's a difficult game. I have died. I don't think dysentery, but definitely
things
hypothermia
like it,
and like bleeding out more often than I would like to admit.
Sure, but I think because it's sort of randomized too, in a sense, like the items you get randomized, like your upgrades or whatever, your resources.
Now you can store items on your dog, and when you restart, you get the items left. But like some stuff is very rare, and do you spend it on this run?
Right, or just try to pack it up. Yeah,
like it's tough.
Fair enough.
Tough stuff.
Yeah. All right, so now I'll move on. I'm sorry. My number 4 is, I was about to say, Evil Within 2 and AC Origins. Evil Within 2 was what Evil Within 1 should have been had they had more time or just thought about it more. It was a bit more open world. The story and the plotline and the characters and so forth were still like serviceable, like whatever, fine. But the gameplay was much improved. Upgrades and so forth were better. Like they just planned it out more. They made more sense and they were more useful. So I got to give them credit on that. And the atmosphere was pretty rock solid. It was just a goddamn competently put together survival horror, and I'm always going to kind of like that. So I'm glad they didn't like make it any worse than Evil Within 1, and they did what they could to tie together, again, like I said, the plot lines and the threads, blah, blah, blah. But just the moment-to-moment gameplay was as survival horror should be, so I got to give them credit. On the AC Origins front, it was a good sort of, I'm going to call it a soft reboot for the AC franchise, which again, as listeners, audiences may have gathered, if you've heard me talk about it anytime previously, I have a love-hate relationship with. Sometimes they are up, sometimes they are on the quality scale, sometimes it dips down. AC Origins is more on the upscale. It was more almost Dark Souls-y combat. It wasn't just like counter, like instant death. Like you had different stances, different weapons, upgrades, and so forth. And I like the fact that, there was no Templar assassin bullshit because this is the origins of the assassin. So like it was all set up. It was in ancient Egypt, which is a really good setting. It was really well realized, well designed. Like, climbing pyramids and just going through like Thebes and Alexandria and stuff like that. It was really cool. Like they did a good job. They always do a quality job, at least if nothing else, of recreating the historical period and era that they put it in. But this one is one you haven't really seen much. And the story itself was overall, I got to give them a shout out for making the main character Bayek's wife, Aya. She was really well fleshed out. I liked her as a character, and you get to play as her. Cynically, they shoehorned in like some Black Flag shit where like you're her on a boat. But hey, again, that's really good. Like the boat shit, the pirate things was awesome. So yes, they're like sort of like grabbing at it, but nevertheless, it was solid overall and a good entry, one of the stronger-ish ones in the AC franchise. You guys got anything else on your honorable mention? All right, I'll just run down mine. Number 5, again, a quick tie, Uncharted Lost Legacy. I think you played it, Steve-O, or I thought you shipped it to me. It doesn't matter.
Uncharted, the new one?
Yeah, it was sort of like, it was its own game. It was less, it was $40, I believe. Yeah. So Drake isn't in it at all. It's about Chloe and Nadine from 4, and like they have like their own little adventure. And again, it's the gameplay that you know and are familiar with from Uncharted, but it was solid. And I think it's better than 4. And I've said what my thoughts on 4 were. But yeah, because Drake was gone, that means they could focus on these characters, not have him like, I'm Nathan Drake, and here's a fucking quip like every 5 seconds. Like I like their the sort of antagonistic relationship between each other, and then partnered up to become their own sort of like team, archaeological team. And the voice actors again did a great job. So it was really, really solid. So I'll give them credit on that front. And for Guardians of the Galaxy, it was Telltale's. So overall, it was satisfying. That is. There were some up and downs. I thought some weird like plot points or like character like choices that didn't make sense to the characters that I would have set up, like at least from the Guardians themselves. But overall, it was enjoyable. It was like a fun little romp, playing as Peter Quill and like switching off between your characters, the other teams, and like making their like exploring some of their side stories was really quality. So overall, good job. They're both equally like I said, fine for what they are, but I enjoyed them more than I didn't enjoy them. All right, so now we come to like a fun one to do. We used to call them the raspberries. I've called it this year lackluster/underwhelming games. So I will start off. That
doesn't really roll off the tongue.
I know. Like, shitty titles, I guess. Ones that you thought were weak. Your shit's weak.
Shit's weak. Yeah. That's what we're gonna call it.
That's a new official title. So just to be clear, number 5, like for me on this list, is the closest to being an honor roll entry. So number 1 is like the worst. So I'll do it that way.
All right.
It's going to be Outlast 2. And really, I have see my article why. It just let me down on a lot of fronts. I loved Outlast 1. I liked it a lot. And I was excited for Outlast 2. I think they took a lot of missteps. Some design elements were just like bizarre, didn't make any sense. And again, level design atmosphere was perfectly fine. Everything else was lackluster. Even the theme they're trying to go for, they're trying to say like was respectable on the surface, and then what they ended up saying was either nothing or I have no fucking clue. Like what it was supposed to be. So like it just let me down a lot. I was, again, it's within my survival horror purview, but Outlast 2, like I wish they just skipped it or did something else because it was just a big letdown for me. So
the late shift. It ain't no rock and roller.
It's no rock and roller.
I guess I'm my own Razzie this year because I didn't play very many games, so I don't really have anything that super let me down. Everything I played was enjoyable.
It was pretty solid.
Or I stopped playing it within like 10 minutes. So.
I'll make a funny joke, not a funny joke, a joke. That, of course, if you don't play as many games, there's less of a chance of you running into a shitty one.
Exactly.
So, fair enough. All good.
Yeah, so my Razzie is me.
All right. Stevo's his own
I'll let y'all down.
Fair enough. So I'll just run down the rest of my list, or I think you have 1 or 2 more.
No.
Okay. Number 2 on mine is Perception. Again, I wrote an article combining them. Why? It was made by 1 or 2 of the team who worked on the original BioShock, so that was like the selling point for me. But I thought it was just weak. It's, again, a core of it is a walking sim, and the framework seemed cool, but again, gameplay, mechanically, it would just, it didn't click. It didn't work. A lot of it was annoying to play, in a sense. So I liked it on paper, but I did not like it actually in practicality. So it was weak. Number 3, Get Even. My joke is, of course, it was not even at all. It was, in fact, one of the most uneven games I've ever played in my life. Some of it was good. Some of it was solid. I thought that the VR sort of angle was fine. Like, that's cool. But the game itself, like, contradicted itself in a sense. The best way I can describe it. They're like, here's a mechanic that you can use. Oh, but don't use it because then you'll change the story. Like, well, fuck you. It doesn't make any sense. Why even have it there if you're going to, like, slap me on the wrist for doing it this way if I get to have, like, the choice of doing, one or another, A or B. So that grated on me. And the story itself, again, was serviceable at best, but not much beyond that. So number 4, stronger a little bit, Sniper Elite 4 was solid. Just a nice, like, entry in the series. Like, yeah, third person. They put it in Italy, I believe, was this iteration's World War II theater.
Sure.
So you snipe, you set up camp and snipe somebody, and just bullet porn, essentially, like murder porn happens when you shoot the bullet and someone's head or heart or lungs or whatever explodes. But it was still solid. Like, their mechanics worked more often than not. It made sense. And yeah, like, you know what you're in for. You're in World War II and you're sniping people. You're sniping all the Nazis, and it was fine. So finally, and number 5, this one I had a bit of, I was trying to figure out where to put it. It's Middle-earth, Shadow of War. At the end of the day, it was a good game broadly. They did a fine job making the sequel to Middle-earth, but the Nemesis system, yes, it's still good. It's cool, but they could have done more with it. Like the, recruiting orcs was fine, like mind controlling them, whatever. Like, it was a good system, but some of it was too much, and especially the end game. They asked too much of the player. It was sort of like padding, like pure padding. I didn't like that, and I also had to give it dock points for having microtransactions, even though I didn't buy a single fucking thing. It's sort of like it was counterintuitive because I could just buy all the orcs if I wanted to, instead of going around and like recruiting them and mind controlling them.
Aren't we going to do a episode on that?
And you're right, we are indeed going to cover microtransactions itself, so I'll speak more about that. But because Shadow of War had them, and because of the things I said, that's why it's close. It's the closest one to being on the honor roll.
So you may know where Scott comes down on the microtransactions.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think only the developers themselves who buy into them are for microtransactions, more or less, I would say. But more to come on that.
Or rich people who just want to play games.
Maybe, but regardless, it's closest to being on a roll. But just because some of the missteps it took, it lies here on my list for that. All right. So that's pretty much our entire list. So the final thing we do is 2 things, if any, games you've played this year in 18 so far that either, whatever impressions you have of them, what have you been playing this year? 4 months into it.
Even though it goes against 2 things I said earlier on, I've been playing the remastered version of Secret of Mana. Both remastered and appealing to my nostalgia. I like it. They did a good job of both keeping
the core
what
story.
I liked about it, but also adding things in that flesh out the story more. Mm-hmm. And overall, I think if you're a fan of Secret of Mana, you're not going to play this and be like, "What did they do to my precious mana?" You'll enjoy it.
Fair enough. Got anything, Steve? I'm not sure if you do. Think of one thing.
No, I haven't played anything that came out in 2018 yet. I think I just played What Remains of Edith Finch, which was awesome, but obviously last year's game. And I just downloaded Ratchet and Clank. So
because it was free?
Yeah, because it's free. So I'm looking forward to playing a little bit of that.
Yeah, I gotcha. Oh, I'm sorry. I have 2 quick things that I missed. This is a new thing for this year. I put in a wild card. The game I bought was called The Long Dark. Looked cool. I like the premise of it, but it got mechanically bogged down. It's not a bad game. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it wasn't the game for me. It was sort of like a hardcore survival sim in a sense, but it was like just too much to handle. I think they could have toned it back a bit, and it would have been like more manageable. But
was that the one I wanted to play?
Yeah, yeah. It again, like, it looked fine. Like, I liked the design of it. It was competently designed. Just again, personally for me, I couldn't get into it. I had to stop playing it. But it wasn't a poorly done game. And then 2 quick things: games that came out that we didn't get to play. I just only have 2, and we mentioned one of them definitely previously, Cuphead. Because it's a fucking Microsoft exclusive, I don't have Xbox anymore.
I would have played the shit out of Cuphead.
Yeah, I watched a whole bunch of videos.
It so bad.
Yeah, and also I saw Steve-O's roommate, Lewis, who's sometimes on here on our shows, play Breath of the Wild, which many people expound it for Game of the Year, and like I get why and so forth. I just didn't get to play it, but I know that it's a good game, and from what I saw and played like 10 minutes of it, yeah, looked really cool. But I just didn't get to play it myself.
Yeah. It did look good.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into the, in fact, final thing. Games that are upcoming for the rest of this year that we're looking forward to. So I'll toss it to you guys first. From what is coming out, what are you guys looking forward to play?
The one that I'm most looking forward to is God of War. I platinum trophies, all the remasters of those when they released the first 3 again.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to this one. It
looks really good.
Yeah, it does. And I'm looking forward to the new setting it's taking place in.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yeah, I think
Same for you.
I mean, I'm going to crib off you on that one.
Yeah. I agree as well.
It looks pretty good. I liked all the, I really enjoyed all the other God of War games, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. I forget if there was anything else.
Well, I'll give you a quick list. I'll
run
remind
us down here, Scott.
So mine is, God of War. I'm definitely looking forward to play it. I think one of us is going to buy it, then we can all ship it around. But as of the date of this recording, in 3 days, Far Cry 5 comes out. And I can't fucking wait for it. I've been waiting for forever. They actually push it back a month and whatever, that's fine. Because I'm really looking forward to getting back into the Far Cry franchise and just a hardcore, like, open world FPS with a lot of side quests and just awesome mechanic gunplay. Other things that are coming out, Dark Souls Remaster, in fact. The remaster of the original.
Yeah, but...
Crackdown 3. I know. I'm just saying, here's some of the things that are coming out.
Right,
yes. Right. There's a lot more, but these are the ones that I jotted down. So, Crackdown 3, Darksiders 3, Vermintide 2 for consoles. Vermintide 2 is already out for PC, but I really like the first one, so I would like to check that out. There's a game coming out called We Happy Few, which is sort of like Orwellian dystopia survival. That looks pretty good if they don't like fuck up, because it had some issues. It had some like hurdles that up at till this point. There's a new Spider-Man game coming out eventually. So they claim. They've showed it off at least. 2 other things. Red Dead Redemption 2. I know you guys don't care much about it, but if Chris were here, he might agree with me. But it's coming out. I am looking forward to it. Coming out in October. And the one last thing I want to mention is that this is, again, a personal thing for me. There are 2 Lovecraft games apparently, possibly being made. One was announced like 2014 or something like that. And had a couple of trailers shown off, and then for months, maybe a year or more even, of silence, like no news, either good or bad, came out of it. I recently discovered in the past like 2 weeks that another studio is making a Lovecraft game called The Sinking City, and they have some trailers and screenshots, concept art. It all looks fucking great. All I ask is somebody, please, fucking make me the open world Lovecraft investigative tale, a la like the same studio, in fact, who did Sherlock Holmes, that was Daughter, and Crimes and Punishments, is working on it. So if they take that framework and that engine and put you in the Lovecraft story, that'd be grand.
Sherlock versus Cthulhu. Sign me up.
And the thing is, they even did they did do a Sherlock like with a light Lovecraft elements like before that, but I just want them to have pure Lovecraft with the Sherlock style of investigative mechanics. So that'd be great. Other than that, that's pretty much been our year for 2017.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was pretty solid, at least for me. I got 2 more games than I thought, and many of them were quite strong, which is, of course, yes, why I cheated and had a bunch of ties. But check out all the games that, and we basically we've agreed upon 2 or 3 games in our top 5 list, just like different spots. But nevertheless, my final thought is, if you must play only one game, play What Remains of Edith Finch, because it is the one that, in fact, advances the medium, I feel, in the best way, in the way that it needs to be advanced at this point. And then slightly behind that, play Night in the Woods as well, because it does the same thing, just a little teensy bit behind. Other than that, check out the ones that we mentioned if you have time.
Yeah.
As we might have. So, any final thoughts? Any things I missed or anything like that, guys?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, this has been Games and Gaming Culture, formerly Syntax Error, as I said. And keep an eye out for some changes that are coming up soon to our channel. But for now, that'll do it. I've been Scott Thurlow, here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Don't play video games. Go out searching for Cthulhu yourself.
Or do both. And Stephen Amosi.
And I'm looking forward to talking games with you guys this year.
All right. Sounds good. See you next time. Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.